The first time Commander Xyler witnessed the phenomenon, it failed to register properly in his crystalline neural pathways. The Kthar's multifaceted eyes had observed humans for nearly 2 standard cycles aboard the Starlight beacon, cataloging their inefficient movements, their unpredictable emotional fluctuations, and their constant need for verbal reassurance. But nothing in his extensive observational database had prepared him for what happened when Second Officer Tavik's exoskeleton cracked during the ambush, spilling greenish ichor across the ancient temple floor. Captain Eva Rostova had been examining a partially degraded inscription when it occurred. One moment, the human was hunched over the stone tablet, making notes on her datapad with the characteristic slowness Xyler had come to expect from their species. The next, at the distinctive scent of Tavik's life fluid, her entire physiological state transformed. Her pupils expanded so rapidly that her eyes appeared to darken completely. Her breathing pattern shifted to deeper, controlled inhalations, and her posture reconfigured into what Xyler could only classify as a predatory stance. Most alarming was the absolute stillness that overtook her. The constant fidgeting that humans seemed incapable of suppressing vanished instantly. Captain Rostova became something else entirely, something Xyler's ancestors would have recognized as dangerous long before they achieved sapience. But the official Galactic Concord classification of humans listed them as empathic support personnel with notes about their emotional sensitivity and cooperative pack bonding tendencies. Nothing in the 18,000-page document on human integration mentioned this transformation. Tavik's down. Lyra's melodic voice pierced the silence. Her avian features contorted in distress as her empathic senses registered the wounded Kthar's pain. The Cygnian liaison officer's feathers flattened against her body, a sign of her species' extreme anxiety. Lyra's distress only increased when she sensed the sudden change in the human crew members. Her head swiveled toward Security Chief Marcus Jones, who had already shifted into the same unervingly focused state as Captain Rostova. The former Marine's expression hadn't changed, yet somehow he appeared entirely different, like an organic weapon that had just been armed. Multiple contacts approaching from the western corridor. Jones's voice was quieter than usual, each word precisely measured. Sensor readings unclear. Permission to secure the area, Captain? Xyler stepped forward, his jointed limbs clicking against the stone floor. Negative. Protocol dictates that Kthar Security Unit 7 will establish a defensive perimeter. Humans will attend to emotional support and documentation only, as per Concord Directive 342B. Even as he spoke, Engineer Anya Sharma was already moving toward a fallen column, her movements exhibiting the same unnerving efficiency that had overtaken her colleagues. Her dark eyes, similarly dilated, scanned the surrounding architecture with what Xyler could only interpret as tactical assessment. This violated at least 6 subsections of human deployment regulations. With respect, Commander, Captain Rostova said, her voice carrying a new undertone that registered as a threat assessment trigger in Xyler's threat detection subroutines. We don't have time for protocol. Dr. Tanaka needs to stabilize Tavik, and we need to secure this position now. Before Xyler could reassert command hierarchy, the temple wall to their left exploded inward in a shower of ancient stone fragments. Through the dust cloud emerged 3 massive shapes, bipedal but hunched, with sickle-like appendages where arms should be. Their skin possessed the texture of wet leather stretched over geometric bone structures that didn't conform to any recognized evolutionary pattern. Kthar Security Unit 7 activated their standardized defense formation, plasma deterrents humming as they established the regulation 3-meter containment circle. The creatures paused, assessing the light barrier, then simply leapt over it in perfect synchronization. The Kthar officers, programmed for sequential threat response, had no contingency for this direct circumvention of primary deterrence. What happened next occurred so rapidly that Xyler's optical recording function failed to capture several microseconds of action. Marcus Jones propelled himself toward the nearest creature, using a fallen stone as leverage. His movements exhibited none of the characteristic human clumsiness Xyler had documented in mandatory physical training sessions. Instead, they displayed a fluid precision that seemed biomechanically impossible for their species. Simultaneously, Engineer Sharma had repurposed her geological sampling device into something else entirely. With 3 quick modifications that violated its warranty and basic operational parameters, she transformed the scientific instrument into what could only be classified as an improvised sonic disruptor. Frequency match to their cranial structure, she called out, her voice carrying the same unervingly controlled quality as Jones's. 3-second burst should disorient them. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, meanwhile, had positioned himself over the fallen Kthar officer. His pupils were equally dilated, yet his hands remained perfectly steady as he applied pressure to Tavik's exoskeletal fracture. Without looking up from his work, he called out, "The I-Corps has a paralytic agent. They're hunters. Venom delivery system likely in the forward appendages." This information transfer occurred without any of the humans looking at each other, as though they had established some form of communication network that bypassed standard protocols. Lyra backed away, her feathers now fully compressed against her body. "They're synchronized," she whispered, though Xyler wasn't sure if she meant the creatures or the humans. "I can feel their intent. It's coordinated, focused." Captain Rostova had retrieved a supposedly non-functional ancient artifact they had cataloged earlier, a metal rod with ergonomic contouring that now seemed suspiciously well-suited as a weapon. "Xyler, get your security team to fall back and protect Lyra and Dr. Tanaka. We'll handle the forward engagement." The suggestion that humans would handle anything beyond documentation and psychological support was so fundamentally contrary to Concord operational guidelines that Xyler's response system briefly stalled. This delay proved costly. One of the creatures lunged toward Lyra, sensing perhaps that her empathic abilities made her the most vulnerable target. In the 0.7 seconds it took for Xyler's security team to recalibrate their positions, Captain Rostova had already intercepted the attacker. She moved with a speed and precision that contradicted all documented human performance metrics in Xyler's database. Using the ancient artifact as a staff, she struck the creature precisely where its skeletal structure connected to its neck analog. The blow wasn't particularly powerful by Kthar standards, but its placement was eerily perfect, as though she had instantly analyzed the creature's biomechanical vulnerabilities. The creature staggered backward, emitting a high-frequency sound that caused Lyra to clutch her head in pain. In response, Engineer Sharma activated her modified device. The resulting sonic pulse caused the creatures to falter momentarily, just long enough for Security Chief Jones to engage the largest of the 3. Jones's combat technique bore no resemblance to the standardized defensive protocols that humans were permitted to learn under Concord regulations. Instead, his movements resembled those of apex predators from multiple worlds, the precision of an Arcturus sand panther combined with the momentum management of a Rigelian stalker. He seemed to anticipate the creature's movements before they occurred, targeting joints and sensory organs with devastating accuracy. Xyler found his logical processes increasingly unable to reconcile the human's current behavior with their officially documented capabilities. According to all available data, humans were classified as cooperation specialists with limited tactical value in direct confrontation scenarios. Their primary function in mixed-species crews was to provide emotional stability and creative problem-solving during non-emergency situations. Yet here was irrefutable evidence that these same humans possessed combat capabilities that exceeded those of dedicated security specialists. More disturbingly, they seem to be operating with a level of coordinated precision that shouldn't have been possible without neural implants or the hive mind adaptations found in certain insectoid species. As the fighting intensified, Xyler observed that the humans' respiratory rates remained controlled, their movements economical, and their focus absolute. They were not experiencing the fear response that should have been overwhelming for emotional beings in a high-stress combat situation. Instead, they displayed the characteristics of apex predators in their element. The largest creature managed to slice through Jones's uniform with one of its appendages, drawing a line of crimson across his arm. The scent of human blood joined the Kthar ichor in the enclosed space. Rather than triggering pain or panic, this injury seemed to intensify the human's already heightened state. Jones didn't even glance at the wound as he continued his assault with redoubled precision. Engineer Sharma had moved to a position near the chamber's ceiling supports, somehow scaling the ancient architecture with unexpected agility. From this vantage point, she deployed a second modified device that emitted a pattern of light pulses that seemed to confuse the creature's sensory systems. Their eyes track ultraviolet frequencies. She called down. They're using some kind of bioluminescent navigation. Captain Rostova immediately adjusted her strategy. Marcus, target the orbital ridges. Disrupt their primary sensory input. The precision with which Jones altered his attack pattern based on this information suggested a level of adaptive combat intelligence that directly contradicted the Concord's assessment of human capabilities. He began targeting the bony protrusions above what appeared to be the creature's visual organs, his strikes causing their coordinated movements to become increasingly erratic. Throughout this exchange, Dr. Tanaka continued treating the injured Kthar officer with unnerving focus. His dilated pupils gave him an almost non-human appearance as he improvised a sealant for Tavik's exoskeleton, using components from his medical kit combined with minerals from the temple floor. Fascinating molecular structure, he muttered, seemingly to himself, yet loud enough for the entire team to hear. The venom targets silicon-based circulatory systems specifically. This wasn't a random attack. These creatures were engineered to hunt Kthar. This assessment, delivered with clinical detachment while in the midst of what should have been overwhelming chaos for a human, further disrupted Zyler's understanding of the species. The doctor was simultaneously performing emergency xenobiological medicine, conducting chemical analysis, and formulating strategic insights, all with the focused efficiency that his entire species was supposedly incapable of maintaining under pressure. With a final coordinated assault that combined Jones's physical attacks, Sharma's sensory disruption, and Rostova's tactical positioning, the three creatures were neutralized. Two lay unconscious, while the third had retreated through the breach in the wall. As suddenly as it had begun, the immediate danger passed, and, just as remarkably, the humans began to shift out of their predatory state. Their pupils gradually contracted, their breathing patterns returned to their characteristic inefficiency, and their postures reverted to the more relaxed configurations that Zyler had cataloged as baseline human behavior. Captain Rostova immediately went to check on Tavik, kneeling beside Dr. Tanaka. Will he make it? Yes, though he'll need proper medical facilities within the next few hours. My field treatment will hold until then. The doctor's voice had regained its usual gentle cadence, though his hands remained steady as they completed the improvised medical seal. Lyra approached cautiously, her feathers still flattened in distress. Her empathic senses had registered the human's transformation both into and out of their predatory state, and the experience had clearly disturbed her deeply. What happened to you?" she asked, addressing all four humans, but looking specifically at Rostova. "Your minds became something else, something dangerous." Captain Rostova exchanged glances with her human colleagues, a silent communication passing between them that Zyler couldn't decode. "It's an adaptive response," she finally said. "Stress-induced focus. Nothing more." But Lyra's empathic abilities made her impossible to deceive on such matters. "No," she insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've felt human stress responses before. This was different. This was coordinated hunting behavior. Ancient. Powerful." She wrapped her wings tighter around herself. Terrifying. Zyler's analytical processes had recovered sufficiently to reassert command protocols. "Captain Rostova, you and your team have violated 17 separate provisions of the Concord regulations regarding authorized human activities. You have exceeded your operational parameters and engaged in restricted combat behaviors. This will require a full report to Concord Central. Rather than exhibiting the shame or defensive posturing that humans typically displayed when confronted with rule violations, Captain Rostova merely nodded. File whatever reports you need to, Commander. But first, we need to get Tavik to the medical bay and figure out what those creatures were doing here, and why they were specifically engineered to hunt Kthar. The implication was clear. There were larger concerns than regulatory compliance. More disturbing to Xyler was the realization that the human captain was correct. Our communications are being jammed, Engineer Sharma announced, checking her modified equipment. Started approximately 30 seconds before the attack. This wasn't random. Security Chief Jones was examining one of the unconscious creatures with the methodical attention of a professional hunter studying prey. These aren't natural life forms. The muscle structure, the skeletal reinforcement, they're designed. Bioweapons. The term sent a cascade of high-priority alert protocols through Xyler's processing system. Bioweapons were strictly prohibited under Concord law. Their presence here, specifically engineered to target Kthar physiology, suggested a level of conspiracy that transcended simple security concerns. We need to return to the Starlight Beacon immediately, Xyler declared. Not possible, Sharma replied, still working with her modified equipment. The jamming field extends at least 20 kilometers in all directions. Our shuttle's navigation systems will be compromised. We're effectively stranded until we can locate and disable the source. Captain Rostova's expression shifted subtly, not returning to the predatory focus of battle, but adopting a different kind of intensity. Then we find the source. If these creatures were engineered to hunt Kthar, and they've been deployed here with communications jamming technology, this isn't a random encounter. This is a coordinated operation. Lyra's empathic senses quivered. There's something else here. Something. Waiting. I can feel a presence watching us. The humans exchanged another of those indecipherable glances. Xyler noted how they positioned themselves, automatically and without discussion, to create a defensive perimeter around the injured Kthar and the still distressed Signian. Commander, Captain Rostova said, her voice carrying that same unsettling quality of calm that had preceded the combat. I understand you'll want to file reports about regulation violations. But right now, we need to work together if we're going to survive this. My team has capabilities that aren't in your databases. We need to use them. The request directly contradicted Concord protocols. According to regulation, the Kthar commander should assume complete control of the situation, with humans restricted to advisory and support roles only. But the evidence of the recent combat was impossible to ignore. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that far exceeded their official classification. Specify these capabilities, Xyler demanded. Captain Rostova straightened, meeting the Kthar compound gaze directly. My team consists of former specialists, not the emotional support personnel you've been led to believe we are. Marcus was Force Recon Marine Corps. Anya was Frontier Defense Engineering. Kenji was a combat surgeon. I was Intelligence and Strategic Operations. We've been repurposed by the Concord to fit their preferred narrative about humans. This admission constituted a level of deception that would normally result in immediate detention and criminal charges. Yet Xyler found his logical processes leading to an unexpected conclusion. The immediate survival of his team took precedence over regulatory enforcement. You will operate under my direct supervision, Xyler stipulated. All actions must be approved. Something flickered across Rostova's face, perhaps the shadow of the predator that had emerged during combat. Understood, but I need your trust that when we make recommendations, they come from experience. Experience your databases don't acknowledge we have. Before Xyler could respond, a low rumbling vibration passed through the ancient temple structure. Dust and small fragments of stone drifted down from the ceiling. That wasn't natural, Engineer Sharma said, checking her equipment. That was a subsurface charge, approximately 2 kilometers northeast of our position. Security Chief Jones had already moved to secure what remained of their equipment. Captain, we need to move. This position is compromised. Dr. Tanaka looked up from his patient. Tavik is stable for transport, but we'll need to be careful. His exoskeleton integrity is significantly compromised. Captain Rostova turned to Zyler. Commander, your call. The Kthar commander processed the situation with crystalline logic. The presence of engineered bioweapons, targeted communications jamming, and now subsurface explosives indicated a sophisticated operation far beyond a simple ambush. Standard Concord protocols for such scenarios were insufficient given their isolation and the specific threat to Kthar physiology. We will proceed to investigate the source of the jamming field, Zyler decided. Security Unit 7 will form an outer perimeter. Human team members will. He paused, his programming struggling against ingrained protocols. Will be authorized for limited tactical operations under my supervision. The relief on the humans' faces was evident, though Zyler noted that they were already checking weapons and equipment before he had finished speaking. They had anticipated his decision, another indicator of cognitive processes more sophisticated than their official classification suggested. As they prepared to move out, with two Kthar officers creating a stretcher for Tavik, Lyra approached Captain Rostova. I sense what happened to you and your team, the Signian said quietly, when the blood scent triggered your transformation. We've been told humans evolved from herbivorous primates who developed tools and cooperation. But that's not true, is it? Captain Rostova checked her makeshift weapon one final time before answering. It's partially true. We are cooperative. We did develop tools. She met the Signian's gaze steadily. But before that, we were persistence hunters, pursuit predators. We didn't just use tools. We tracked prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. For hundreds of thousands of years, that's what we were. What we still are underneath everything else. Lyra's feathers trembled slightly. The Concord knows this. Some suspect. Most prefer the narrative that we're just emotional support creatures who occasionally have clever ideas. Rostova's expression softened slightly. That part of us is real too, Lyra. We do care about cooperation and connection. But when survival is threatened... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Lyra had felt firsthand what humans became when threatened. As they moved out into the jungle surrounding the ancient temple, Zyler observed the humans closely. They had returned to their typical inefficient movements and unnecessary vocalizations. But now the Kthar commander recognized this for what it potentially was, camouflage, concealing predatory capabilities beneath a veneer of harmless sociability. The dense vegetation of Zeta Reticuli foreclosed around them as they followed Engineer Sharma's readings toward the source of the jamming signal. The engineered creatures had come from somewhere, and that somewhere likely contained answers about who had developed bioweapons specifically designed to target Kthar physiology. The humans moved through the jungle with a familiarity that belied their supposed evolutionary history as plains-dwelling primates. They spotted signs of passage that even Zyler's enhanced optical systems missed. Broken stems with specific discoloration patterns, unusual insect behavior indicating recent disturbances, subtle compression patterns in the soil. There's a reason humans were kept off exploration teams for so long, Captain Rostova said quietly as she noticed Zyler observing them. And it wasn't because we're too emotional or fragile. Clarify, Zyler demanded. We're too good at finding things that others want to keep hidden, she replied. And we ask too many questions about why they're hidden. The implication sent another cascade of priority reassessments through Zyler's logical processes. The Concord's restrictions on human activities had always been justified as protective measures, both for humans themselves and for the more developed species they served alongside. But if Captain Rostova's assessment was accurate, those restrictions might serve a very different purpose. As they penetrated deeper into the jungle, following the strengthening jamming signal, the evidence of artificial construction became increasingly apparent. Ancient stone structures, partially reclaimed by vegetation, gave way to more recent installations. Metal components with energy signatures that engineer Sharma identified as consistent with Concord auxiliary technologies. This doesn't make sense, she muttered, examining one such component. These are standard Concord communication array parts, but they've been modified to create focused interference patterns rather than clear transmission. Security Chief Jones knelt beside what appeared to be a recent track in the soft ground. We've got more of those engineered creatures moving in this area. At least 6 distinct individuals based on stride patterns. Dr. Tanaka, still monitoring the injured Kthar officer, looked up with concern. The creatures that attacked us, their venom delivery system was specifically calibrated for Kthar physiology. That suggests detailed knowledge of Kthar biological systems. Knowledge that should be restricted to top-level Concord medical databases. The implications hung in the air, unspoken but impossible to ignore. Someone with access to Concord technology and classified biological data had established a facility on this supposedly uninhabited planet, a facility now demonstrably hostile to Kthar. Captain Rostova turned to Commander Zeiler. We need to consider the possibility that elements within the Concord itself may be involved in whatever is happening here. Such a suggestion would normally be dismissed as paranoid human emotionalism, but the physical evidence surrounding them made such dismissal increasingly illogical. The previous survey teams, Zeiler said slowly, his crystalline thought processes assembling connections. 3 expeditions, all reporting negative findings before losing contact. All with Kthar's science officers aboard. They weren't lost, Security Chief Jones stated flatly. They were targets. Lyra had been unusually quiet, her empathic senses clearly overwhelmed by the situation. Now she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. There's a structure ahead. Large. Underground mostly. And I sense. Minds. Many minds. Working with. Purpose. Focused intent. Engineer Sharma checked her modified equipment. Confirmed. Large power signature approximately half a kilometer ahead. Consistent with a substantial underground facility. The jamming signal originates from that location. Captain Rostova looked to Zeiler. Commander, we need a plan. The Kthar commander faced an unprecedented logical conflict. Standard protocols dictated caution, withdrawal, and requesting reinforcements from the Starlight Beacon. But communications were jammed. They had an injured officer requiring medical attention, and the facility ahead potentially contained answers to a conspiracy that might reach into the Concord itself. More disconcertingly, he found himself considering tactical options that relied primarily on the previously hidden capabilities of the human crew members. Capabilities that, according to all official documentation, shouldn't exist. We will proceed with reconnaissance only, Zeiler decided. No engagement unless absolutely necessary for survival. Primary objective is to disable the jamming technology and restore communications with the Starlight Beacon. Captain Rostova nodded, then turned to her team. Anya, you'll focus on the jamming tech. Kenji, stay with Tavik and the Kthar security team as our fallback position. Marcus and I will handle forward reconnaissance. She looked at Lyra. We could use your empathic abilities to warn us of any hostile intent if you're willing. The Signian hesitated, her feathers still compressed in anxiety. She had witnessed what the humans became in combat, yet now she was being asked to work directly alongside them in that capacity. You're afraid of us, Captain Rostova acknowledged softly, after what you sensed during the attack. I understand. Yes, Lyra admitted. What I felt from you and the others. It wasn't like anything I've experienced from humans before. It was ancient, powerful. It's still us, Lyra, just a different aspect of what we are. Rostova held the Signian's gaze. We're not mindless predators. We're protectors, too. Sometimes the line between those things is thinner than we'd like to admit. After a moment, Lyra straightened, her feathers relaxing slightly. I will assist, but please, maintain control of what you become. As they approached the hidden facility, the jungle gave way to a carefully maintained clearing, too regular to be natural, yet disguised to appear so from orbital scans. At its center stood what appeared to be ancient ruins, similar to the temple they had been investigating. But Engineer Sharma's readings indicated sophisticated technology beneath the crumbling facade. There's an entrance concealed within the central structure, she reported. And the jamming signal definitely originates from below. Security Chief Jones had already identified potential entry points and patrol patterns of the engineered creatures that circled the perimeter. 6 of them currently visible, moving in predictable patterns, suggests they're programmed for routine security rather than active hunting. Captain Rostova turned to Zyler. We can neutralize the perimeter guards quietly, then access the facility through the concealed entrance. Engineer Sharma can target the jamming technology while we gather intelligence on who's operating this facility and why. The plan was sound, but it relied entirely on the combat capabilities that humans supposedly didn't possess. Zyler found his logical processes increasingly unable to reconcile the discrepancy between official documentation and observed reality. Why has the Concord classified your species as non-combatants when you clearly possess superior tactical capabilities? He asked directly. Rostova's expression became unreadable. That's a complicated question, Commander. One with political answers rather than logical ones. The simplest version is that other species find it comforting to believe we're harmless. Before Zyler could process this response fully, Lyra suddenly stiffened, her empathic senses clearly detecting something alarming. They know we're here, she whispered urgently. Someone just gave orders to capture the Cthar alive and eliminate the others. As if in confirmation, the engineered creatures patrolling the perimeter suddenly altered their movement patterns, converging toward the team's position with purposeful speed. So much for stealth, Security Chief Jones muttered, already shifting into a combat stance. Captain Rostova looked to Zyler. Commander, we're out of options. Let's do what we do best, or none of us will survive to report what we've found. The logical conclusion was inescapable. Zyler gave a single, sharp nod. Proceed. The change into humans was immediate and profound. Their pupils dilated in perfect synchronization. Their breathing patterns shifted to the controlled rhythm Zyler had observed during the previous combat, and their postures reconfigured into the economical readiness of apex predators. What followed was unlike anything recorded in Concord tactical databases concerning human capabilities. Captain Rostova and Security Chief Jones moved with such coordinated precision that they appeared to communicate without words or signals. They separated, approached from different angles, and neutralized the first 2 engineered creatures before the others even registered the threat. Engineer Sharma had already modified her equipment into something that disrupted the creatures' sensory systems, creating confusion in their ranks. She moved with the same predatory efficiency, despite her technical specialization supposedly rendering her unsuited for combat operations. Even Dr. Tanaka, remaining with the injured Cthar, had transformed his medical station into a defensible position with remarkable speed and tactical awareness. Lyra watched with a mixture of fear and fascination as the humans operated in their predatory state. They're not just fighting, she whispered to Zyler. They're hunting. There's a difference. I can feel it in their minds. The engagement was over in less than 2 minutes. 6 engineered creatures lay neutralized, and Captain Rostova was already moving toward the concealed entrance to the underground facility. Anya, you're with me, she called to Engineer Sharma. We'll locate and disable the jamming technology. Marcus, secure our exit point. Commander Zyler, your decision whether to accompany us or remain with your injured officer. The question wasn't just about tactical positioning. It was a test of trust. Zyler processed the options with crystalline logic and reached a conclusion that contradicted years of Concord doctrine. I will accompany you, he decided. 2 of my security team will remain with Dr. Tanaka and Officer Tavik. As they descended into the hidden facility, the architecture transitioned from mimicked ancient ruins to unmistakably modern Concord technology. The corridors were standard configuration, the control systems identical to those found on Concord research stations throughout the galaxy. This is a black site, Engineer Sharma said quietly, examining a terminal. Officially, it doesn't exist. Captain Rostova, still in her focused predatory state, moved through the corridors with alert precision. Can you access their systems? Working on it. Sharma's fingers moved across the interface with uncanny speed. Security protocols are Concord military intelligence level. This isn't some rogue operation. This has official sanction somewhere high up. They encountered surprisingly little resistance as they penetrated deeper into the facility. Instead, they found laboratories, biological research stations, containment units filled with partially developed versions of the creatures that had attacked them. They're breeding them, Dr. Tanaka said over the comm link, having examined the data Sharma transmitted back. Engineering bioweapons with specific targeting parameters for different species. The ones we encountered were designed for Cthar, but there are others here designed for Signians, Altarians, even modified humans. The implications were staggering. This wasn't merely a rogue operation. It was a systematic program to develop species-specific bioweapons under the cover of official Concord activities. Found the jamming transmitter, Engineer Sharma announced, accessing a central control room. I can disable it, but they'll know immediately when communications are restored. Do it, Captain Rostova ordered. We need to alert the Starlight Beacon about what's happening here. As Sharma worked, Captain Rostova discovered a secure data terminal. Commander Zyler, I need your authorization codes. This might tell us who's behind this operation. The Cthar commander hesitated only briefly before providing his credentials. The display illuminated with classified Concord directives. Operation Silent Veil, authorized by individuals whose names were still encrypted even at his access level. This goes beyond a simple black research site, Rostova said, her voice tightening as she reviewed the data. They're developing these weapons as a contingency plan against what they're calling species instability risks, which apparently includes Cthar logical independence and, she paused, human predatory potential. The revelation landed with singular clarity. The Concord, or elements within it, were developing weapons to control or eliminate species they deemed potential threats to stability. And they were doing so in complete secrecy, using the very regulations and classifications they had created to conceal their activities. Jamming field disabled, Sharma announced. Communications restored. Almost immediately, the facility's internal alarms activated. Security doors began sealing throughout the complex. They know. Lyra's voice came urgently over the comm. I can sense multiple minds converging on your position. They're sending everything they have. Captain Rostova turned to Zyler, her pupils still fully dilated in combat readiness. Commander, we need to get this information to the Starlight Beacon immediately. The Concord needs to know what's been happening here without their full authorization. Agreed, Zyler replied, his logical processes having reached the same conclusion. But extraction appears problematic given the facility's security response. Security Chief Jones's voice came over the comm, tense but controlled. Captain, we've got multiple hostiles approaching the entrance. Engineer combatants, but also uniformed personnel. Concord Special Operations insignia. The situation had escalated beyond a simple escape scenario. They were now effectively declaring themselves in opposition to elements of the Concord's own covert military operations. Download everything. Captain Rostova ordered Engineer Sharma. Zyler, can you transmit directly to Cthar High Command using your emergency protocols? We need this information to reach multiple authorities simultaneously so it can't be contained. The request represented a significant breach of Concord communication protocols. Yet the evidence surrounding them left no logical alternative. Affirmative. Preparing emergency transmission. As Sharma completed the data download and Zyler initiated his emergency protocols, the facility's internal security systems activated. Decontamination procedures, clearly repurposed as weapons, began flooding certain sections with gas. They're trying to force us into a containment area, Rostova observed. Standard Concord tactical funneling. What happened next demonstrated yet another aspect of human capability that had been systematically underrepresented in official documentation. Rather than reacting with panic to the escalating threat, Captain Rostova and Engineer Sharma became even more focused, their movements more economical, their decision-making more rapid. Secondary exit route through maintenance shaft C7, Sharma announced, having analyzed the facility schematics. It bypasses the main security checkpoints. Marcus, fall back to rendezvous with Dr. Tanaka and the others, Rostova ordered over the comm. Take egress route Delta to the secondary extraction point. We'll meet you there after transmission is complete. The precision with which the humans coordinated under extreme pressure, without visible signs of stress or emotional compromise, directly contradicted everything the Concorde had officially documented about their species' capabilities in crisis situations. As they moved through the facility toward the secondary exit, they encountered the first of the Concorde's special operations personnel, heavily armored soldiers with weapons designed for capture rather than elimination. They want the Kthar alive, Rostova noted grimly, and us eliminated as witnesses. What followed was another demonstration of human combat capabilities that defied official classification. Captain Rostova and Engineer Sharma, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, moved with such coordinated precision that the Concorde operatives, trained specifically for such engagements, found themselves outmatched by what officially shouldn't have existed. Human predatory instinct refined by tactical training. Rostova used the environment itself as a weapon, manipulating the facility's own security systems against the operatives, while Sharma created distractions using repurposed equipment. They moved like coordinated predators, separating their prey, creating confusion, striking with precision rather than force. Commander Zeiler, witnessing this display while completing his emergency transmission, found his logical processes reaching an unexpected conclusion. The Concorde's entire approach to human integration had been based on deliberate suppression of their true capabilities. The question was why. The transmission completed just as the facility's systems indicated a complete lockdown initiation. They had minutes at most before escape would become impossible. Transmission successful, Zeiler announced. Data packets sent to 7 separate Kthar command nodes using emergency protocols. They cannot all be intercepted. Captain Rostova nodded, still in her focused combat state. Let's move. Extraction route through Maintenance Access J-14. As they navigated through increasingly hostile territory, Zeiler observed something else remarkable about the humans' combat effectiveness. Despite their lethal efficiency, they were deliberately employing non-fatal tactics against the Concorde operatives, disabling rather than killing when possible. This selective application of violence represented a level of ethical control that shouldn't have been possible in what appeared to be an instinctive predatory state. They rendezvoused with Security Chief Jones, Dr. Tanaka, and the others at the secondary extraction point, a maintenance tunnel, that led away from the main facility and toward the surface. The injured Kthar officer had been stabilized, but Dr. Tanaka's expression indicated concern. We need to get him to proper medical facilities within the next hour, he reported, pupils still dilated but focus unwavering. The paralytic agent is neutralized, but there's secondary systemic damage. As they emerged from the facility into the dense jungle, alarms continued to sound behind them. The Starlight Beacon would have received their emergency signal by now, but whether help would arrive before Concorde Special Operations located them remained uncertain. Lyra, her empathic senses strained to their limits, suddenly tensed. Aircraft approaching. Multiple signatures. Heavily armed. Security Chief Jones immediately began assessing the surrounding jungle. We need cover. Dense canopy area 30 meters north. It'll mask our thermal signatures if they're using standard Concorde scanning protocols. They moved swiftly through the undergrowth, the humans still maintaining their predatory focus. Zeiler noted how they instinctively positioned themselves to protect the injured Kthar and the Signian, despite the fact that both species were officially classified as more advanced than humans in Concorde hierarchy. As they reached the dense canopy, the sound of aircraft grew louder. Search patterns became visible through gaps in the foliage. Concorde tactical deployment, standard grid search with sensor sweeps. They're deploying ground troops, Jones reported, observing the aircraft movements. Establishing a perimeter. They're not taking chances. Captain Rostova turned to Zeiler. Commander, The Starlight beacon should have received our transmission by now. Standard response protocol would be to dispatch a retrieval shuttle to our emergency beacon coordinates. We need to reach those coordinates before the Concord operatives establish a complete lockdown of the area. The logical course was clear, yet Zyler found himself processing a secondary concern, one that would never have occurred to him before witnessing the humans in action. Your team's capabilities will be officially documented after this incident, he stated. The suppression of human potential cannot continue given the evidence we have uncovered. Something flickered across Rostova's face, a complex expression that Zyler's recognition software couldn't fully analyze. Let's survive first, Commander. Then we can worry about human classification in the Concord registry. Their journey through the dense jungle became increasingly challenging as Concord forces tightened their search grid. The humans' stamina, another characteristic that had been systematically underreported in official documentation, proved crucial as they maintained their pace despite the difficult terrain. Engineer Sharma continuously monitored communications frequencies, tracking the Concord operational chatter. They've identified our destination, she reported grimly. They know we're heading for the emergency extraction coordinates. Then we don't go there directly, Captain Rostova decided immediately. Circular approach. We'll use the ridge line to the east, then descend to the extraction point from an unexpected vector. The tactical adjustment came so naturally to her that Zyler found himself calculating the statistical improbability of a species supposedly classified as emotional support personnel, demonstrating this level of strategic adaptation under pressure. As they navigated the ridge line, Dr. Tanaka continued monitoring the injured Kthar, his medical attention never wavering despite the physically demanding journey. His vitals are stabilizing, he reported. The improvised treatment is holding. Their progress was halted when they encountered another group of the engineered creatures, clearly deployed specifically to intercept them. Unlike the previous encounters, these specimens appeared more refined, their movements more coordinated, their tactics more sophisticated. They're learning, Security Chief Jones observed grimly, adapting their approach based on our previous engagements. Captain Rostova surveyed the situation, her dilated pupils taking in every detail of the terrain and the threat. We can't afford a prolonged engagement. Anya, create a diversion on the western approach. Marcus, create a corridor. I'll take point. The humans moved with such synchronized precision that they barely needed to communicate their intentions. Engineer Sharma repurposed her equipment yet again, creating a cascade of sensor anomalies that confused the creature's navigation systems. Jones used the environment itself as a weapon, triggering a small landslide that blocked several of the creatures while creating a temporary path forward. Rostova led the way, her movements exhibiting that same predatory efficiency Zyler had observed earlier. She didn't attempt to overpower the creatures. Instead, she anticipated their movements, redirected their momentum, and exploited gaps in their coordination. Throughout the engagement, Zyler noted that the humans maintained protective positions around the injured Kthar and Lyra. Despite being in what appeared to be a purely predatory state, they never lost sight of their primary objective, protecting their team. They broke through the ambush and continued toward the extraction coordinates, the sounds of pursuit gradually fading behind them. Engineer Sharma's monitoring equipment indicated that the Starlight beacon had indeed dispatched a retrieval shuttle, but Concord forces were converging on the landing zone from multiple directions. We'll have minutes at most once the shuttle arrives, Rostova assessed, and they'll be expecting us to approach from the most direct route. Lyra, who had been observing the humans with increasing fascination despite her initial fear, suddenly offered an unexpected suggestion. I can create a diversion, she said, her feathers finally relaxing from their compressed state. My empathic projection can confuse their sensor operators momentarily, make them think they're detecting human signatures in the wrong location. Captain Rostova looked at the Signian with new appreciation. That would give us the window we need. Can you maintain it while moving? For a short duration, yes. Lyra straightened, seemingly finding new courage. I've been studying how your mind's focused during combat. It's not so different from Signia meditation techniques, just applied differently. This unexpected alliance, the empathic Signian adapting her abilities to complement human combat tactics, represented exactly the kind of innovative cooperation the Concord had been founded to foster. Yet, ironically, it was happening in direct opposition to Concord authority. As they approached the extraction coordinates, they could see the retrieval shuttle already descending into a small clearing. Concord forces were visible on the perimeter, establishing firing positions around the landing zone. "Now, Lyra," Captain Rostova directed. The Signian closed her eyes, her feathers expanding as she projected her empathic influence toward the Concord forces. The effect was subtle but immediately noticeable. Several operatives suddenly redirected their attention toward a position far from their actual approach vector. The humans, still in their focused predatory state, moved with coordinated precision through the momentary gap in the perimeter. They escorted Xyler and the injured Kthar officer, forming a protective formation that maximized coverage while minimizing exposure. The retrieval shuttle touched down just as they reached the clearing. The rear hatch opened to reveal a mixed crew of Kthar and Signian officers from the Starlight Beacon, clearly surprised to see their commander in the company of humans who bore little resemblance to their officially documented demeanor. "Medical team now," Dr. Tanaka called as they boarded, still focused entirely on his patient despite the chaos around them. Concord forces, recovering from Lyra's empathic diversion, began converging on the shuttle. Captain Rostova was the last aboard, covering the team's entry with remarkable composure despite enemy fire impacting around her position. As the shuttle lifted off, narrowly escaping the Concord security perimeter, the humans finally began transitioning out of their combat state. Their pupils gradually contracted, their breathing patterns returned to normal, and their postures relaxed from their predatory readiness. The transformation was so complete that the Kthar and Signian crew members who hadn't witnessed the earlier events might never have suspected what these humans were truly capable of when threatened. In the shuttle's medical bay, Commander Xyler approached Captain Rostova as Dr. Tanaka continued treating the injured Kthar officer. "The Concord will attempt to suppress this incident," Xyler stated with crystalline logic. "They will claim the facility was a rogue operation. They will attempt to discredit our findings." Captain Rostova nodded, fatigue finally showing in her features now that the immediate danger had passed. "Yes, that's the standard response to exposure of classified operations. They will also attempt to reclassify your team as anomalies rather than representative examples of human capability," Xyler continued. "To maintain the fiction that humans are incapable of the coordination and tactical efficiency you demonstrated." Engineer Sharma joined them, having completed a security sweep of the shuttle systems to ensure no tracking devices were active. They've been doing it for decades, creating the narrative that we're emotionally fragile, tactically inconsistent, and fundamentally unsuited for anything beyond support roles. "But why?" Lyra asked, her empathic senses still sensitive from the intense experiences of the past hours. "Why? Would the Concord deliberately suppress understanding of human capabilities?" Security Chief Jones, checking his minor injuries nearby, answered with unexpected insight. "Fear, not of what we are, but of what we represent. Adaptability without technological dependence. Combat effectiveness without neural enhancements or exoskeletons. The ability to shift from cooperation to lethal efficiency and back again, all without external control systems." The observation carried profound implications. The Concord's entire approach to technological development and species classification was built around measurable, controllable parameters. Humans represented a variable that couldn't be easily quantified or predicted, a species whose baseline capabilities included adaptation itself. "The data we recovered from the facility will reach multiple independent authorities now," Xyler stated. "The suppression of information cannot be complete." Captain Rostova gazed out the shuttle viewport at the dense jungle receding beneath them. "Perhaps, But systems resist change, Commander, especially systems built on centuries of established hierarchy and classification. Nevertheless, Zyler responded, my report will include complete documentation of human capabilities as observed during this mission. Logical analysis demands nothing less. As the shuttle docked with the Starlight beacon, they were met by a contingent of Concord officials who had arrived on an emergency administrative transport. Their expressions indicated that the situation had already escalated beyond a simple retrieval operation. Commander Zyler, the lead official, a senior Nithar administrator, addressed him formally. Your team will be debriefed separately regarding the unauthorized investigation of a classified Concord security installation. Captain Rostova stepped forward, fully composed despite the implied threat. The installation was developing illegal bioweapons specifically targeted at Concord member species. Administrator, we have transmitted evidence to multiple independent authorities. The administrator's compound eyes shifted slightly, the Nithar equivalent of controlled displeasure. Captain Rostova, your human team exceeded operational parameters by engaging in combat activities restricted under Concord Regulation 342B. This represents a serious breach of protocol. A protocol based on deliberately falsified data regarding human capabilities, Zyler stated, his logical processes having reached an inescapable conclusion. I have observed firsthand that human classification within the Concord Registry is fundamentally flawed and potentially deliberately misleading. The statement, coming from a Nithar commander known for absolute adherence to regulations, created a momentary silence on the docking bay. The administrator recovered quickly. This discussion is not appropriate for public areas. All involved personnel will report for individual debriefing immediately. Dr. Tanaka spoke up from beside the medical transport preparing to move the injured Nithar officer. My patient requires continued medical supervision. I will accompany him to medical facilities before any debriefing. The calm authority in his voice, still carrying traces of the focused precision that had emerged during combat, caused the administrator to hesitate before nodding agreement. As they were led to separate debriefing chambers, Lyra unexpectedly moved to stand beside the human team rather than with her fellow Signians. I will provide testimony regarding the human team's actions, she stated firmly, as both witness and beneficiary of their protection. The gesture of solidarity, from a species that had traditionally regarded humans as emotionally unstable curiosities, was not lost on anyone present. The formal debriefing process lasted for 3 standard cycles aboard the Starlight beacon. Throughout, the Concord administrators attempted to establish that the facility had been a rogue operation, unauthorized by Central Command, and that the human team's actions, while perhaps justified under extreme circumstances, remained a violation of established protocols regarding their species. Captain Rostova and her team maintained absolute coherence in their accounts, their reports aligning with Zyler's own testimony with a precision that further undermined the Concord's classification of humans as emotionally variable and tactically inconsistent. The data they had transmitted could not be entirely suppressed. Nithar High Command, alarmed by evidence of bioweapons specifically engineered to target their physiology, demanded a full investigation independent of standard Concord protocols. Several Signian enclaves, influenced by Lyra's first-hand account, began questioning the established narrative regarding human capabilities and appropriate roles. On the final day of debriefing, Commander Zyler was summoned to a private meeting with the senior administrator. The Thar official's demeanor had shifted from authoritative to something approaching conciliatory. Commander, your service record indicates unwavering adherence to Concord protocols and regulations, the administrator began. Yet you have now formally challenged the fundamental classification of an entire member species based on observations during a single incident. Logical analysis permits no other conclusion, Zyler responded. The human capacity for predatory focus, combined with ethical restraint and tactical coordination, has been systematically underrepresented in official documentation. This represents either catastrophic assessment failure or deliberate suppression of information. The administrator's crystalline neural pathways processed this challenge with characteristic Cthar efficiency. The Concord Council will require time to evaluate the implications of your report and the supporting data. In the interim, Captain Rostova and her team will be reassigned to non-operational roles pending full psychological evaluation. This would be a tactical error, Zyler stated flatly. Their capabilities represent an asset that has been deliberately underutilized based on flawed classification. Logical efficiency demands proper utilization of available resources. The administrator studied him for several moments before responding. Your perspective has been noted, Commander. However, Concord protocols must be maintained while review is conducted. The humans will be reassigned as stated. When Zyler informed Captain Rostova of the decision, he expected frustration or perhaps the emotional volatility that humans were supposedly prone to exhibiting. Instead, she received the news with the same calm focus he had observed during combat. "They're afraid," she said simply, "not just of what we can do, but of what it means for the entire classification system the Concord is built upon. If humans have been mislabeled, what other species have been inaccurately assessed? What other potential has been suppressed?" The observation carried implications that extended far beyond their immediate situation. The Concord's approach to member species integration was based on rigid classification of capabilities, with roles and responsibilities assigned accordingly. A fundamental error in that system threatened the hierarchical structure that had maintained stability, but also stagnation, for centuries. As they prepared to disembark from the Starlight Beacon for their respective reassignments, they were met by an unexpected delegation. The Cthar security team that had served with them during the mission, led by the now-recovered Officer Tavik. "We request permanent assignment to Captain Rostova's command unit," Tavik stated formally to Commander Zyler. "Our combat effectiveness metrics improved by 42% when operating in coordination with her team. Logical analysis indicates optimal results from continued integration." Lyra was there as well, her feathers fully extended in the Cygnian expression of confidence and certainty. "The Cygnian Diplomatic Corps has formally requested that I continue serving as liaison to the human contingent. My first-hand experience with their true capabilities is considered valuable perspective. These small acts of solidarity, bureaucratically framed in terms that Concord administrators would find difficult to reject outright, represented the beginning of what would likely be a long process of reassessment and change." As they parted ways, Captain Rostova extended her hand to Commander Zyler in a human gesture of respect and alliance. The Concord was founded on the principle that different species working together could achieve more than any could alone. They've just forgotten that true cooperation requires honest understanding of what each member brings to the collective. The Cthar commander extended his jointed appendage to complete the gesture, an unprecedented acknowledgement of human equality. Logical analysis indicates that accurate classification is essential for optimal functionality. The current system is provably flawed. Correction is inevitable, though timing remains variable. Captain Rostova smiled slightly. "That's a very Cthar way of saying change is coming, Commander." Indeed, Zyler's compound eyes registered the subtle relaxation in her posture, the controlled alertness that remained present even in apparent relaxation. The predator was always there, he realized, but governed by choice and ethical calculation rather than simple instinct. A curious parallel exists in your species' dual nature, both the capacity for lethal efficiency and the choice to restrain it. Not so different from the Cthar ability to override logical conclusions with ethical imperatives when necessary, she observed. This comparison, linking aspects of human and Cthar cognition that official Concord taxonomy considered fundamentally dissimilar, highlighted exactly why the existing classification system was insufficient. As the human team departed for their temporary reassignment, Zyler observed how the other species on the Starlight Beacon regarded them differently now. Word had spread about what had happened on the planet's surface. Not the official report, but the raw truth of humans transforming into something ancient and formidable when threatened, their pupils dilating at the scent of blood, their movements becoming those of coordinated predators rather than emotional support personnel. The fear this knowledge generated was real, but so was the fascination. Species that had long dismissed humans as harmlessly emotional curiosities now watched them with new awareness. Recognition of depth that had always been present but deliberately obscured. In a ship's medical bay, before departing to his new assignment, Zyler reviewed the biological data they had recovered from the secret facility. The Concord scientists had extensively documented the predatory aspects of human physiology, the pupil dilation response, the neurochemical shifts during threat assessment, the remarkable coordination capabilities that emerged under pressure. These weren't new discoveries. They were carefully compiled research that had been deliberately excluded from official human classification for decades. The most revealing document was a risk assessment from nearly a century earlier, when humans had first joined the Concord. It stated the conclusion with crystalline clarity. Human predatory capabilities, combined with their cooperative social structures and technological innovation, represent a potentially destabilizing element within established Concord hierarchies. Recommend classifying as support personnel only, with emphasis on emotional aspects rather than predatory potential. Implementation of Regulation 342. B to restrict combat roles recommended. The deception had been maintained for generations, not because humans were emotional liabilities, but because their full capabilities represented a challenge to the established order. A species that could shift from cooperative social behavior to coordinated hunting with such fluid efficiency defied simple classification. A species that had achieved spaceflight without neural enhancements or hive mind coordination contradicted the technological determinism that underpinned Concord hierarchy. As the Starlight Beacon continued its mission, now with a new awareness spreading quietly through its crew, Zyler filed his final report on the incident. In it, he included a direct observation that would likely be referenced in Concord discussions for years to come. The most remarkable aspect of human predatory capability is not its effectiveness, but its selective application. When their pupils dilate at the scent of blood, they do not become mindless hunters. They become more focused protectors. The fear this transformation inspires in other species is not entirely misplaced, but it is incomplete. What we witness is not simply the emergence of a predator, but the conscious direction of predatory capability toward chosen ends. This represents not a liability to be suppressed, but a potential to be properly integrated within Concord operations. The report would undoubtedly face resistance. Classifications that had persisted for generations would not be overturned immediately. But the truth, once observed directly, could not be entirely forgotten or suppressed. In her new temporary assignment, Captain Eva Rostova received a copy of Zyler's report, forwarded through unofficial channels by Lyra, whose position in the diplomatic corps gave her access to otherwise restricted documents. She read it in her quarters, a slight smile forming as she reached the commander's final observation about human nature. The Cthar had seen more clearly than most, had recognized that the predator and the protector were not separate aspects of humanity, but the same capability directed by conscious choice. When her pupils had dilated at the scent of blood, she hadn't lost control, she had gained focus. What the Concord feared wasn't human unpredictability, but the implications of a species whose greatest evolutionary advantage was adaptability itself. Change would come slowly to an organization as vast as the Galactic Concord. Classifications and regulations that had shaped interspecies relations for centuries would not be overturned by a single incident on a remote planet. But the first cracks had appeared in the carefully maintained fiction about human capabilities and their proper role among the stars. Eva glanced at her reflection in the viewport, watching her pupils adjust to the changing light. The predator was always there, just below the surface, as it was in every human. Not a liability to be feared or suppressed, but a capability to be acknowledged and directed. The next time her pupils dilated at the scent of blood, it wouldn't be met with the same fear and misunderstanding. At least not from those who had witnessed firsthand what humans truly were. Predators who had chosen to become protectors, hunters who had learned to heal, killers who had decided to create. That complexity couldn't be contained in any classification system. And perhaps that was exactly why it had been hidden for so long.